I was thinking about lately is the nature of mental illness. That it's not a lack of intelligence so much as an abundance of craziness. That people who have mental illnesses often have behaviors or obsessions or things they don't understand. It's not really a disability, so much as the new term differently abled applies. Because people who are disabled mentally or intellectually think of other things. Other things make sense to them. They find other ways to figure stuff out. And this can be a blessing and a curse, but that's the nature of everything. Like I said in the previous video, some people will try things, some people will ask questions. But the other thing is, sometimes it's a trait that everybody has taken to the extreme, and that they medicate them to scale it back to a more controllable level. The other thing is, mental illness isn't so much something that you're just stuck with. A lot of it is psychological. A lot of it is things you were taught, things you assume, things you remember that affect the way you control the world, that you can set yourself free from with therapy. In which case you have a choice about doing it. It's something you don't want to do. You don't do it anymore. The other thing is, mental illness, is a bit complicated. There's no one thing that proves you're not mentally ill. There's nothing you don't do that proves you're not mentally ill. Because there's different kinds of disabilities, You need to know what your diagnosis is and what it is that they're talking about when they say you have that diagnosis. Is to say, I'm too smart to be mentally ill. In which area, if there's an area you're not smart in, it looks like a video game where people will be like, I'm not weak, but you have a vulnerability. You have something that a blind spot in your defense, or a type of attack that weakens you, or you have a weapon that it's not very reliable, it jams all the time, or maybe you have low control of your abilities. That's how mental illness is. Oftentimes people try to say, if I get smarter in other areas, I won't have a weakness. It doesn't mean just being weak. It means you have something that makes you weak, or something you're not good at, or a time and a place that you're not that strong, or a muscle that's undeveloped. And it's just like with weightlifting and strength training. If people aren't going to ignore the fact that your upper arm isn't developed because you made your forearm bigger. That relates to another thing, compensating, which is where people overdo one thing to hide the fact that they have a weakness. In which case, the bully will target your weakness every single time and ignore your strength. Ignore the things you're good at and just focus on the things you're bad at. There's also a good thing with training mentally ill people, or just anyone. Let's focus on things that you need to do better. Things you're already good at, keep up the good work. But now we're going to work on things you're not good at. And that's the problem I see with people talking about they don't have a weakness. They're not weak. Well, look closer. There are times that you're weak. The other thing people talk about with mental illness, so that can be cured, psychological condition, things you didn't understand, bad memories, unconscious programming. Yeah, you probably could get over it. But if it's neurological, if it's in your brain chemistry, the way your nerves are wired, it's part of who you are, and you can't take yourself apart like that. You can destroy yourself, literally. So you have to live with it. The other thing is, don't beat yourself up over it. If you're born that, most likely it's not your fault. And it's not the end of the world. You can get better, and the other thing is, just don't worry about it. look up what your diagnosis actually is. If you got the diagnosis, I was told, kids shouldn't look it up, because then they'll try to treat themselves, but they should have a place. Instead of doing your job for you, they won't have an idea of what your job actually is and what you're doing. And people have a right to know that. People have a right to know what's going on in their head, what's going on in their blood chemistry. The right to be, the patient should be involved, because their life and their mind, that is, the way they think, is at stake. So don't and the other thing is, people with mental illness, you shouldn't look at it in terms of just knowing the diagnosis. You should know the patient and their history. That gives you a better idea than just knowing that they have a diagnosis, assuming that everyone's that diagnosis is interchangeable, because they're not. Lastly, don't make fun of people with disabilities, because as funny as it looks to you, there's probably something you do that's equally hilarious out of context, that is devastating to you. Lastly, people with mental illness, it's not always obvious. It's not always like people with Down syndrome, where you can tell they have Down syndrome. Most of the time, it's just people with mental illness just come off as very strange people. The other thing is, a lot of people deny that they have mental illness, and, you have to realize it's not an easy subject to talk about for some people. It can be genuinely terrifying. That's the other thing. If you do have mental illness, realize that if you're shouting at the top of your lungs, people look at you as a crazy person, and that is terrifying. One other thing is, another factor of mental illness is often strong emotions, strong opinions, rage. And my advice to people like that, realize there's a difference between people having the same emotional value to information and actually having a cognitive understanding of what you're saying. They might not agree with it, they might not have a second opinion, but just hear them out. My other advice to parents and educators of people with mental illness, you have to explain things to them, because they can't figure it out on their own. But they can learn. They often are very smart too, but they don't know this stuff, so explain it to them. And they'll learn, and they may change some behaviors. I can't think of anything else, but I want to hear people's comments.